Hello all. Apologies for the lack of camera this week. That is as because well, basically I haven't been able to pull enough information on who I am to make a model or even pull a name at this moment. In fact, the topic of this video is about the only thing I've managed to figure out about myself, which is that I like Conlangs. So yeah, this is why I'm making a Conlang. So obviously, yeah. Okay, so covered that bit. Yeah, so last week, whilst we were in our free-ish time, I started making Conlang for TTRPG. The system is putting together. Why is relatively simple. I do think Conlangs are cool and interesting, and I want to do something for the system as a whole that the system as a whole would appreciate, which means working on a project we share. So yeah, obviously the TTRPG, and then it's the same reason I'm making the video because I don't want to do something unrelated to Conlangs in the free time I'm getting, but the system insists the YouTube channel is important to upload, and I already messed it up by a week. So yeah, I'm basically apologizing to the system by making a video for messing up last week and not giving anyone free time to make one. So yeah, let's discuss the Conlang making somewhat. So actually no, let's go to this oh, okay, no, that's not the right document. Okay, this one. Okay, so this is the master document on all the Conlangs that will be needed for the TTRPG. Needed isn't the right word, but that would be of value for the TTRPG. So, and what we know about them so far. For a lot of them, it's just a name. So these, most of them you'll see are following currently an English what you would see in English for them in terms of things. So yeah, so obviously they're split into different families, and these are basically based on that's a good point. Oh, that's not got our map open. Should have done that, but yeah. Basic idea is different civilizations are going to have different countries are going to have different languages, and then based on their proximity to each other, they might come from the same family and have influences from different places. So obviously we've got Farian and Marken, which are part of the same family, and they both are descended from early Farin or early Farian, which is to this day mostly desert-based civilization. So that's going to inform what the focus of the language, what you might have a lot of words for example, or what might be considered important. So, for example, water might be placed of relatively high import, just because for a desert civilization, water and things to do with water mean survival. So yeah, and then we have family 2, Yelinit, which is on the, I believe it's on the same continent, but it's to the north above a mountain range, so it's not. So early on, obviously, there wasn't much travel over the mountain range, so you don't get much cross pollination. There will be some cross pollination between the two language families, but they are separate families developed separately. And then we have family 3, which comes from Old Hetian, which is the language I've actually been working on. And then you get Hao-Chot, which translates in English to Hetian, or speak language in high import. So yeah, and that's the direct descendant of Old Hetian. And then we have Shili-Shot, which comes into or in English Chilean, which is influenced by Old Hulian as well. Which you'll notice is family 4, and we've got some known rules here that we'll go into in more detail whilst we're discussing Old Hetian. And then with Hulian, which comes from the Hulian Holy Confederacy, which survived as a purely religious language for a while, whilst the source lands were under Hetian control, which goes into the history of the world. Basically, the Hetian Empire, a long time ago, basically took over an entire continent and started expanding out elsewhere as well. But yeah, that's where. So Hulian for a while was a purely religious language, whilst their lands were under the control of the old Hetian Empire, which has now collapsed, and there's a new Hetian Empire that's risen that, might likes to claim it is a direct descendant of the old Hetian thing, and therefore claim all the other land basically in the world. But, they don't control all that land. They just like to think they should. And then we have Hetian, which is a Conlang, because the Tolwith are a race that basically are refugees in a lot. Basically, well, they've made their own nation state. A large number of them banded together to make their own nation state, but a lot of them were fleeing persecution elsewhere in the world in various forms. And I'll let someone who wants to go into the history of the world more, or discuss other parts of the world, discuss more why that's the case. But essentially, yeah. So it's a Conlang. It's specifically a Conlang that's the idea is it's built for ease of learning, based on, so it's going to incorporate bits from all the other languages and basically attempt to be something that anyone from anywhere else in the world can pick up with relative ease. But it's also obviously going to be its own language, and potentially will have had some evolution from that base point as well as people speak it. But it's going to, the idea with it is to make it less naturalistic than the other languages, which the idea is with them, of course, is to make them as naturalistic as I can, given my current skills with making a Conlang. Anyway, so the first thing, obviously, you might want to know is what the sentence structure is, which is described at the top of the. Basically, the first thing we did, although it has been changed as we've realised things need adding in. So, for example, explanations, descriptors, count, the actor, and so on, and then descriptors for the verbs, and then so on through to question markers and tense markers at the end of the sentence. And then, so we've got how proper nouns are formed. So, for example, you have mon, which as a suffix, which means place of many living. So the best example of this is Hetmon, which is the capital city, or what is the capital city. So Het is a descriptor of the place, and Mon is place of many living, or city, essentially. So, and they all follow the constant, a consonant for dishonored or least important form of the suffix, and then you've got consonant e consonant for unhonored or important, and then consonant o consonant for the most honored or most important. So hom becomes the entire world, for example, and then hem is consonant and ham is island, or son is deity, whilst san is a person when you're not describing them in an honorific manner, and sen is person when you're giving them honor, essentially. So you might describe someone of, you'd use for someone of higher status than you socially, you'd use whatever their name is, sen. And then someone of lower status than you, or the same status that you don't want to give particular respect to, you'd use san. And then for deities, you'd use son. That's not used that much, but they're not. It would be incredibly rare for an early civilization to be completely atheistic, so they will have a word for God. Even if religion isn't of high import to them, they still would have a religion, almost certainly. And then we've got pronouns, which follow a consonant and then an a. Oh, and we should explain consonants do include sh, th, and sh. So ch, th, and sh as consonant forms directly, which is where you get sha, cha, ma, and tha for I, you, them, and that in all their forms, basically. And there aren't gendered pronouns here at all. So, the closest you get to gender is how honoured you are describing something as. So, yeah. So, the most obvious person of that is if you're describing people, you've got Sarsan or Sarsen, essentially. But I describe, how much honor you want to give yourself, or you, Ha-Sen or Ha-San, or even Ha-Son, although that's unlikely to be used because you'd be calling them a god at that point, which is, you might do in specific circumstances, but it's going to be quite rare. And then obviously you've got a list of nouns here, which follow obviously consonant A consonant. So these follow the same form as your proper noun suffixes, but are and a lot of them actually match up. So we've got hat here for centre, which turns into het for centre for hetmon. So centre, place of many living, i.e. the central city, i.e. the capital city. It's a little convoluted, but it makes sense, really. And then you've got san for person as well, which is the general version of person. So if you're not speaking about a specific person, you would use san to just mean person. And you can obviously, when you're using these as descriptors for proper nouns, you can upgrade the central vowel from an A to an E or an O, depending on import. There's not going to be many O's, but they do exist. So a lot of these are quite general, but they do all. These are quite broad, a lot of them, like body of water. But obviously you can, when you're describing a specific place, you'll have the proper noun form, in which case you can upgrade, for example, tal to tell or tol. If you want to go lake or ocean, essentially. And then the only adjective we've actually formed so far is ali for unimportant, which follows the vowel, consonant, vowel. Oh yes, the vowels. The only vowels are A, E, and O. Sorry about that. But your vowels are A, E, and O, and then your consonants are pretty much every consonant in the English language, plus CH, TH, and what's the one I missed? CH, TH, and SH. But yes, ali is the one adjective we've formed so far, although obviously with that you've got a lot of options there as and when we need them. But the basic idea was just to figure out how things would be formed. And then noun-based adjectives are your noun and then deo at the end. So lat deo, it becomes forward, for example, and ha deo is yours. So yeah, if you want to describe ownership to something, you can use ha deo as the adjective for it. Or tal deo is rainy, based on tal. That's not right. We've got a word for rain. Do we not have a word for rain? Yeah, we've got a word for rain. Okay, I'm going to fix that right now. Daldeo, rainy. I think I might have changed that back at some point. Whatever. Then we've got verbs. So tea is doing, and deo is own, which is where you get your noun-based adjectives from. That's where those come from, essentially, is from the verb own. And then how is speak, and daltea is raining, so doing rain, essentially, which follows a similar thing to the noun-based adjectives, but your consonant A consonant, i.e. your noun, and then tea for doing. Haven't actually made any adverbs yet, but they're consonant vowel. Haven't actually thought of any sentences that need adverbs, essentially, at this point, so we haven't actually made any. We've got numbers, which are vowel, consonant. It's a base 5 counting system, because if your primary initial species are humans, you're probably going to end up with a base 5 or a base 10. So these follow base 5. And we've put numbers up to 6 and then 10 and 11 here. So these basically these you can see basically how these follow a form of, basically, you're saying Adam, Autumn, Oddle. So 2 fives, and then Adam, Autumn, Oddle. So 2 5 1. So 2 5s and a 1, essentially, which gives you 11, because 2 5s is 10. So Adam, Autumn is 10. And then Autumn, Oddle is 6, because it's 5 1. So this is pretty similar to the Roman numeral system, essentially. Although, well, the Roman counting system of base, because that's essentially base 5, although it's not quite, but it's the closest. But yeah, you're just adding on at the end what the additional is on top of how. So it's how many fives, and then fives, and then how many are after the 5. Although if it's earlier than 5, it's just how many after the 5, essentially, because you're going 0 5s. That's a good point. We need a word for 0. We do need a word for 0. 0. Figure that out later. But yes, we do need a word for 0. It's useful to have, essentially. And then we've got tense markers, which are vowel, consonant, far past, past, present, future, far future, and permanent. And these follow a very specific. These follow the vowel import. So the far past is considered the most important, with present the least important, and then future, far future, and permanent becoming more important as you go down. So yeah, permanent things are considered of high import, and things in the far past are considered of high import, with the present and the near future considered the least important. And exclamations, so things like yes and no, follow constant O, and they can be marked with sen or san to show respect levels. If it's a one word sentence, so if someone is like, can you do XYZ, you can just go dorsen or dorsan. So, depending on how much respect you want to give them. You don't have to, but they can be marked that way. You can use them effectively less formally on their own, but in a more formal situation, you would want to mark them with an exclamation. And you would probably, in a more formal situation, also be using sen rather than san, although you might be talking to someone less important than you in a formal setting. So, yes, you can use dorsan, for example, as well. Although that's one less likely ones to come up. And then we've got our question markers, things like do, how, when, can, or have, which are constant, and then an e. So che, the, te, le, and de. And then we've marked out what language changes have happened so far. These are basically based on, these aren't necessarily going to be in this order. So, for example, there is, as we've got ali as a adverb for less important, in some instances, what has happened is where that has been being used to describe unimportance, it has been merged into the word before it. So you go from foul to fally, or tally, and then chetty, for example. And then in proper nouns, whilst writing them, the suffix has started to be capitalized as well. Yeah. And Shah has mutated to she. Yeah. And that isn't actually needed anymore. We've done that. Okay. Get rid of that. Although 0. There we go. Okay. Cool. I think that's everything. If you have any suggestions on what this language needs specifically, whether that be specific words or components of sentence structure that are needed, or word types, although those will likely come together because that's basically those are bouncing off each other, in that you need a place to put a word in a sentence, and you need so you need to know where in a sentence a certain word type goes. And we know all of these aren't like the official word types, but they're useful for us essentially, in that this is how you split things up into how a sentence is formed, essentially. And if obviously if you've got suggestions on how this might evolve, that would be something of interest. Yeah, basically any suggestions on this at all. This is the first time I'm building a Conlang language, so at least properly. So if you know anything about doing that, your input would be valued. Yeah, cool. I think that's everything. Good. This system signing out. Hope to catch you all next week. Please do remember to like, subscribe, comment, especially if you've got any questions you want answered. Be happy to answer them either in the comments or in another video. So catch you all next week.